Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Dani Ramos and Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital. Our special guest today, Marcy BRAMUCCI from People's Light as a theater company, and she's Director of Community Investment. So, hello, Marcy.
Hello, thank you very much.
Welcome to USALA Radio. So, we are very happy to communicate with people in the theater. I mean, I have some contacts in 1812, which is probably one of our common friends, Tyler at 1812.
Absolutely.
And a couple of other companies, the Wilma Theater. And so I'm aware of what has happened to the theater community in general, not only in Philly, but as we know, New York, Broadway, tremendous effects of COVID-19. So, and we're still, we're not completely out of the woods, but this is great to have an opportunity to chat with somebody who is so close to the theater as you are. So, Marcy, first of all, who, where, how? A few comments on your bio.
Certainly. Yeah, so I've always been involved with the arts since kindergarten. I've taken dance classes. I got to be Mother Goose in our kindergarten play, and my parents exposed me to a lot of performances early on. I attended Upper Darby Summer Stage from as far back as I can remember, and this is a very robust theater program in the summer out of Upper Darby High School. It's grown and grown and grown exponentially, but I remember seeing plays there when I was very, very young. And then I got to perform in them as I got older and direct in them. But the arts have always been very near and dear to my heart. And I pursued a theater degree from the Conservatory Point Park, the Conservatory of Performing Arts in Pittsburgh. And from there, it really seemed like, theater being this first love of mine felt, well, I need to do something serious, something more serious than this thing that comes so naturally and easily and is just fills my heart. It seemed like I needed to pursue something along the lines of film or television that was like I don't know, in my mind at the time it felt like some other elevation of the arts, because I took for granted in a way theater as a profession. So I went to California early on, and I was in film production and talent management in Los Angeles for a while, and then I moved back to the East Coast, where I worked for Saturday Night Live in Lorne Michaels' office for a period of time before realizing, nope, it's really theater. I can make a profession in this space. And so I pursued a graduate degree at Villanova University right here in the Philly region. And then I pursued another degree immediately after that in arts administration from Columbia University. All along the way, I have worked with a number of nonprofit arts organizations, nonprofit service organizations, and supported a significant number of theaters in their efforts. Following the program at Columbia, I moved to Bangor, Maine, where I worked as managing director of Penobscot Theater Company, which is the only regional professional theater in the northern half of Maine, of the state. And from there, I knew I wanted to come back home to the Philadelphia region, and the position at People's Light opened up. This was now 8 years ago that I began interviewing and that I was hired at People's Light. And initially, the position was really geared towards, it was framed as Director of External Affairs to kind of marry marketing and development work together. And as People's Light got to know me and I got to know the organization, we evolved the position to become the Director of Community Investment, which involves all departments really, and is much more anchored in the artistic work of the organization while also drawing together and leveraging assets and resources across the development sphere and the marketing sphere of the organization as well. So I've been at People's Light now for 8 years.
Well, thank you, Marcy. That's a very impressive resume. um,
Thanks.
let me see if I can ask you a few questions about parts of it. Because you mentioned Pittsburgh and California and Maine and then Philadelphia. So um, it sounds like you have a lot of diplomas that will be on the pride wall. You know, behind you should be a whole uh, wall full of certificates and diplomas.
I'm
Um,
a lifelong learner. I'm perpetually learning.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. I sort of like that. I like to learn and sort of a Socratic approach to life, asking questions. You know,
Mhm.
who, why is that happening? So, um, California, interesting because a lot of theater people, film, we know television people gravitate to California, and many of them just remain there and make a living out of any of the activities in the arts. So, what did you study in California?
So when I was in California, I worked for a very unique organization. It was a multimedia conglomerate that had talent management. So they had A-list actors from Will Ferrell, Ellen DeGeneres, Jim Carrey. They had all of these amazing talented performers and a lot of comedians, especially. They also produced movies in house as well. They had an arm that was music publishing, and they had an arm that had music talent as well. So, like Alanis Morissette, Green Day. There were just a number of artists that were part of their operation, and I got to see all aspects of the film industry and the music industry being exposed to these agents and producers who were involved in so many different facets. So when I first came to LA, it began as an internship for an organization, and it was called Mosaic Media Group. And from there, I was hired to be first a receptionist and then an assistant, and I got to travel around and sit at the desks and support almost all of these managers and producers because I would float and I would be invited into all of these different spaces as people had need to be away from the office. I got exposed to kind of everything, which is very much, I didn't realize how serendipitous that was because my energy is very much wanting to know the whole animal. So diving right in and getting a sense of this really expansive world was very exciting to me, and helped me understand a lot of business underpinnings that I still carry with me in my work in nonprofit theater, because so much of these practices are central and remain the same whether you're in a for-profit or a nonprofit environment when you're navigating the arts and artistic expression and working with artists. So that's how I began, and it was a really wonderful education that I got there. Um, yeah, I know I'm much more of an East Coast person. The energy of leaning forward and getting things done, and I'm very much energized in leaning forward. And there was a lot of in LA. There's a lot of a relaxed energy that doesn't make sense to me. I'm not a very relaxed person. I'm a very we need to get the thing done kind of person.
Type A.
I I guess a bit of that, unfortunately. Fortunately, unfortunately, but I'm wired to the East Coast.
Well, lucky for us that you prefer the East Coast, and
It's beautiful out there. It's beautiful in California, and I would visit anytime.
I know every time you wake up and say another sunny day in California,
Right.
and then involved in the way you were involved in that industry out there, meeting all these famous people, you get tempted to say, well, I could make a living out here, right? So like, why not?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you mentioned a few names, famous names that we know. Anybody that you recall being impressed by their personality, their activity?
I mean, I've had the pleasure of being in proximity to so many artists of exceptional talent, and some folks who may not even have the name recognition or the fame behind them. There was one artist who, a comedian who still performs. His name is Johnny Sneed, and there are just so many that it's been exciting to see the evolution of their careers. Both artists that are forward facing and the producers behind them who have been navigating the strategy to help support their careers. So there are just so many folks, the whole team behind the movie Elf. There are so many of those folks that I've had the pleasure of working with, and I have to say, in the space of being at Saturday Night Live, I just learned so very much from so many of the strong female performers that were there. So I was at Saturday Night Live in the time where Tina Fey was there, and at her meteoric peak of Saturday Night Live, right when she was transitioning out
Sure.
to develop 30 Rock, and Amy Poehler. And these women are fierce business women and exceptionally generous, thoughtful, and insanely talented human beings. And they were so generous with themselves and their space along the way in making room for other people. But Tina Fey is from this area. I happen to have known her in passing through Upper Darby Summer Stage, and just meeting her at Saturday Night Live and seeing the space that she was making for individuals in the field was so inspiring, and seeing what she was capable of doing and forging her own unique space using her own unique voice was incredibly meaningful to me.
Yeah, great. She's a fantastic talent, and she seems
She really
very,
does.
very approachable. Also, very, well, great. That's one of those things that sometimes people that we run into along the way that they impress us. We may even choose a career or stay in a job just because there is somebody like that we can uh, imitate or uh, sort of follow their footsteps. And so it's great to know these people.
And
And
that's, yeah,
then,
part of my space is being around artists, being in a space that is very collaborative and that has generous artists at the core. Those are the spaces that I want to be in, and that I've had the fortune of being a part of at People's Light and in many of the other organizations that I've worked for. But that's what I gravitate towards, those kinds of individuals.
yeah, I would like to ask you, and we'll wait for that in another segment, but about the influence of women. It has grown tremendously in the arts, and not only women, but minorities and more blacks and Hispanics involved. Not enough to be fully represented, but certainly huge advances on all fronts. I mean, you almost never saw in the 1960s, 70s black faces or Hispanic faces on most shows. So huge leap from the days of when television was born, and there was Ricky Ricardo, the famous Cuban who practically invented the three cameras in television. And after that, it was a huge leap. It was like almost no Hispanics anywhere. So
And then part of that
um,
question is who's in power and who has the capacity to make these decisions. And for so long, it had been one dominant group, and that kept out the representation of others, whether intentionally or unintentionally. But when you have a group that is homogenous, that's deciding everything of what people may absorb of culture, whether it's television, whether it's in publishing industry, whether it's music, whether it's really anything, you have those gatekeepers. And when it's
right.
limited to one particular group, you don't have the perspective, whether or not it's intentional. You don't have the perspective, and so it's not possible to open in the ways that you really need to. So I think what's changing now, there are awarenesses shifting, absolutely. And it's also that those gatekeepers, the people who are able to make decisions, are beginning to change and open up and to be a more diverse representation of the country. And again, as you say, it is very much a start, but we're not there yet. But it is a start and an important
Oh,
one.
absolutely. And I do believe that it was on purpose. I mean,
Hmm.
it's no accident that the industry was dominated by white men for so long, and
Hmm.
at all levels, and that glass ceiling was like very very tight, very firm, and difficult to break. Um, well, we're going to take a brief pause here en USALA Radio. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Estamos en una conversación con Marcy BRAMUCCI, The People's Light. Y regresamos en un momento con Dani Ramos and Schmidt Chatelier controlando la máquina digital. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Méndez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con la mesa redonda de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Nuestra invitada especial el día de hoy es Marcy BRAMUCCI, The People's Light. Y Schmidt Chatelier y Dani Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Bueno, Marcy, you threw me off with the pronunciation of your name because to me it looks very Italian, very BRAMUCCI.
Very You're right. Mm-hmm.
And I had been rehearsing your name, Marcy BRAMUCCI, and then you told me, no, it's BRAMUCCI. So, anyway, so some crazy ancestor decided that the pronunciation was different.
And that even speaks to your previous point about who was in charge and who had power, and the space of the dominant white and male culture. That it wasn't my ancestors; they were my husband's relatives from Italy, who I'm certain it was part of assimilation, of wanting to be more a part of this country, and how do you adapt and find your way in order to be accepted. So at some point they shifted it to BRAMUCCI. Of course, it was BRAMUCCI, but it had been shifted, and I'm sure that was a space of assimilation. So even in our names, and this happens all the time, the space of trying to adapt and trying to become more a part of a culture that would be accepted, and losing a piece of yourself. So it's very interesting, but even down to our names, yeah.
Yeah, we can be certain that if you had insisted on the pronunciation as BRAMUCCI, they would have changed the spelling to accommodate the pronunciation. So you can win either way. Well, Marcy, as we were talking about the influence of women, how it has grown in the theater, and you're a great example of how women are changing the industry on all sides, from theater to film to television. We saw Oprah Winfrey almost single-handedly change how a black, energetic, inventive, original woman could have such a tremendous influence. Mm-hmm. And just in general, the industry has changed for the better. I believe that the kind of energy women have brought to all aspects of creativity, from administration to the front lines, to being on the stage and all that. I think that speaks well for our society, that we have been able to move, even if it has been a difficult path. So let's talk about that. How it has changed from where we were before.
What's amazing about Philadelphia specifically, I'll say, is there are a number of exceptional female leaders of theater organizations in Philadelphia. And that's not the case necessarily across the country. I mean, it's starting to be more now. But the community in Philadelphia, we have, as you mentioned, 1812, run by Jennifer Childs. We have the Wilma Theater, Blanca Zizka, and at People's Light, we've been run by Abigail Adams for many, many, many years. And I've had the fortune of looking to their example, and especially learning very specifically from Abigail Adams at People's Light, whom I have the pleasure of working with, and the space that each of them have made is that they're embracing and leaning into their own unique voice, not trying to assimilate or shift or be someone else, or put themselves into a space of being a more male lens, or the kind of dominant lens. they've had their authentic voice all along and have been anchored very much by what they individually bring to the table. And that's been incredibly inspiring to see that power. And it is a different kind of power, a different kind of leadership. And at People's Light specifically, it's quite a unique organization in the Philadelphia region. But People's Light doesn't have, to my mind, a singular artistic aesthetic. And oftentimes with regional professional theaters, there is one person who sets the artistic tone for everything that you see on the stage. And Abigail has this encompassing space and vision and makes a container that is large enough for many kinds of artistic aesthetics and has a team of artists. There's a company of artists at People's Light, a resident company. And so it's not even, a lot of times in male power structures, it might be a singular vision or a singular kind of energy, one person space. And within People's Light, it is this, it's multitudes. You have many artistic aesthetics that are woven together that do complement one another, that make sense within this larger container that Abigail has made. And it's understanding that it isn't about the individual. It is about the collective. It's about being responsive to community. It's about being open and having the space for others and other voices. Because of course, if you're going to be a theater organization that is intending to serve and engage your community, you're not doing one piece of theater, one kind of art, one singular narrative again and again and again. In order to be really engaging of our full community, we need to be representative of a whole range of aesthetics and perspectives. And that's something that has been incredibly gratifying being a part of People's Light, as there are space for multiple perspectives and aesthetics. And it's something that certainly the organization continues to expand, very much with the new play development work that the organization does, and just with the relationships with artists that have been cultivated over many, many, many years and continue to flourish. So yeah, I find that anchored in the strength and the direction of many of these female leaders, and specifically the one that I have the pleasure of working with at People's Light. I'll also share, and I mentioned to you before, I've accepted the position of Executive Artistic Director for Hedgerow Theater Company in Rose Valley, and I'm transitioning out of People's Light and into that full-time role over the summer. I will still be very much involved with People's Light over the next year and probably beyond in spaces of kind of consultancy and engaging in their ongoing work towards inclusion and accessibility. But with Hedgerow as well in Rose Valley, they have a very long tradition of female leadership as well, a very strong female leadership. Penelope Reed has led the organization for decades, and also with this space of generosity and a space of inviting in other perspectives too. So the legacy of both of these organizations really speaks to me and invites me in. What's interesting about Hedgerow and People's Light is we have shared history of the organizations. That Hedgerow has been around for almost 100 years, and People's Light grew out of Hedgerow Theater almost 50 years ago. Artists that were part of Hedgerow splintered off and created their own organization, and so now these organizations have some shared kind of core values within them, and certainly a shared DNA at the heart. So there's something really exciting to me about being in both of these spaces. So yes, the anchoring in female leadership has been very important to me all along.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I'm quite familiar with 1812. I've been involved with them. I have translated 6 or 7 of their plays into Spanish, and they have used that for what they call a Spanish night, in which they run captions on the side of the stage. Um, so it's a way to try to attract Hispanic audiences, and
Absolutely.
so
I've had the pleasure of chatting with their staff about those that work and about those ambitions. Because at People's Light, we're certainly working on that as well. There's and it's growing out of a play that People's Light is producing. There's a piece that we've been navigating, and we commissioned it from Issa Davis, who is a renowned playwright in the United States. And Issa, when we engaged her initially, she was exposed to the Kennett Square community and the mushroom farming operation and apparatus, for which it's garnered Kennett Square the title of the mushroom capital of the world. and she really gravitated towards this particular community. It's especially fueled by Hispanic and Latino workers who have embodied the mushroom industry and have recently have carried us to this place of it being on the map as the mushroom capital. But ISA connected with this particular community. People's Light has been connected with this community for some time, and we commissioned the play that really delves into many of the nuances and layers of the Latino experience in Chester County, in the suburbs of Pennsylvania, and what this has meant and looked like in recent years. And so, this particular play and the connections that we've developed around it are such that it will be a bilingual production in both English and Spanish. So, if you are a Spanish speaking individual and you come to the play, you will understand the play in Spanish. And if you're an English speaking audience member, you'll come to the theater and you will understand the piece in English, both through what is spoken and through captioning that will have translation as well. So that will be embedded in the production. But the idea of offering something along these lines, we want to make sure that we are inclusive going forward of inviting individuals into the theater who are Spanish speakers, who then can engage with content and who feel at home and a part of the making of the organization going forward. So we've been engaging. We had Spanish language classes for some of the staff that we began, and we're with COVID, it put some of the plans on hold. But there's a lot. We will be ramping back up, and soon we will be premiering this play. It is called Mushroom, and we will be premiering that soon. And with it, opening up our organization that much further to embrace Spanish language translations and not only that, but figuring what are the spaces and containers that we need to be making so that the organization feels feels like a space of comfort and home for individuals that we're inviting in for the first time, and many of whom being Spanish speakers who haven't been a part of People's Light because obviously there haven't been offerings that intentionally engage them and that center their perspective and that are being built with them in mind. So with the production of Mushroom, that is absolutely the case, that this piece is being crafted at its very, very core and center with inclusion of English speakers and Spanish speakers and bilingual speakers together. And I think that with any of this work, it's always the intentionality that is most important, as opposed to engaging something and tacking on an idea at the end, saying, oh, we're doing this great thing. Oh, what if we just, what if we just add ASL interpretation, or what if we just, have Spanish language captions? The space for me that is most exciting and meaningful is when that is a constructed question at the beginning, and that can be entwined in the making of the piece as well, because that's when it just has much greater resonance and relevance. So that's what we're working on, and have much to figure out along the way. But we've been doing that in partnership with our community.
So the title of the piece is Mushroom?
It is Mushroom.
So and what is the plan? What is the timeline in terms of when it's expected to be presented? I know COVID. We'll talk a little bit later about COVID. I know it sort of stopped things on its tracks, but
we had been planning to premiere Mushroom this past fall. So it was announced and ready to be premiered this past fall, and we needed to put that on hold. It will be premiering soon. It won't likely be as we're doing experiments this season. So in 21 to early 22, it won't be for the next couple of months. We're still having some additional development work that we want to invest in, but it will be coming on the horizon soon. We haven't announced it quite yet, but it's a huge project and ambition. It's been in development for the past 8 years. This play's been developing, and of course, the country and the region have changed so dramatically in that period of time. The prior 5 years that we had, the leadership that we had over the country for the past 5 years set a different kind of tone and set a different kind of energy in the community in Kennett Square, where we had to recalibrate and determine, okay, the safety for our Latino neighbors is in jeopardy, and the vulnerability of individuals is so significant and overwhelming that we needed to, first of all, be meaningful partners in how we are supporting and engaging these individuals. That it's not just about tell me your story so we can put this on a stage. It's really about understanding where someone is coming from, what their daily reality is like, and how we as neighbors can be meaningfully supportive. So during COVID, this meant that we provided meals to mushroom workers. We have an in-house catering facility at People's Light, and we packaged up boxed lunches and provided those for some of our mushroom worker colleagues and neighbors. And we also were making protective equipment. We made masks early on in the pandemic to share the protective gear with mushroom farm workers, as well as healthcare workers in and around Kennett Square. So it's not for us. It's not just the storytelling, but it's all about the larger world that these individuals are navigating, and how we are implicated in that, and how we are able to be leveraged to support the needs as they're emerging in this unknown terrain that we're all facing. So the production, it has been in development for quite a long time, but that's because there have been so many changes in our world in the time that the play was first conceived of, and now as it's about to be produced.
Well,
So
we're going to take a brief pause aquí in USALA Radio. On the other side of this break, we'll talk more about the changes that were forced on the theater and, well, everybody because of COVID. And so estamos aquí en una conversación con Marcy BRAMUCCI, les habla Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento. Just give me a count. Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable desde el corazón de la ciudad del amor fraternal. Les habla Fernando Méndez, Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital, y nuestra invitada especial, Marcy BRAMUCCI. Marcy, now let's talk more specifically. I mean, you're so great. You're such a great guest. You have to come back. I don't have to ask you any questions. You just keep going. It's excellent. I don't need a set of questions. I don't need a script.
it's just such a pleasure talking to you.
um, Specifically about COVID, how it set back so many of our plans. You were talking about your play Mushroom. Um, I saw 1812 preparing something they call Tyndale Plays. Fantastic show, which I saw previews of it uh, for almost 2 years, and then it just fizzled. There was like no way to do it, to stage it, because it's not the kind of thing you could streamline. And so here we are. Let's see if it revives. And I suppose uh, People's Light was probably in the same situation as far as postponing things, canceling shows, whatnot.
Yeah, the initial space of pause, I guess, from last March, when we realized, okay, so we can't produce in the theater at the moment, and we're not sure what the future looks like. We ended up navigating this a proposal to bring outdoor theater into communities that we are deeply connected with when it's safe to do so. And so we had developed this plan that is currently in process, where we were producing a play around Bayard Rustin, he's a civil rights leader. Bayard Rustin, openly queer, and he was a Quaker, an African American man who was the architect behind the March on Washington and right hand to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But Bayard Rustin is from Westchester, and a lot of folks don't know his legacy. And so this is another play that we commissioned along with the Mushroom play, that we are bringing a piece of that production out into communities, into Westchester, into Cheney University, where Rustin had attended school, and other community settings in order to meet people where they are, in order to figure out, and all along the way, there have been a lot of questions about safety, about how many people can we gather, in what constellations can we gather, and we just knew all along that we couldn't be dormant. There is so much, there's so much need for exchange, for gathering, for listening to one another, and so we knew we needed to do something to meet people where they were. So this one project, it's called People's Light on the Move, and it involves a piece about Bayard Rustin called Illuminating Bayard, and it involves another piece called Playback Theater. The group, it's People's Playback, that uses improv for storytelling. We gather audience members together and invite their stories and experience, and then bring them to life through improvised forms. And both of these spaces have allowed us meaningful opportunity to connect with audiences, and to connect with community members. We thought we were going to do it in the fall, and then so many different considerations emerged that public parks were not permitting outside organizations to gather at all. So we postponed the plans until this spring and have begun performing in Kennett Square. We had a bilingual performance of our playback offering, where we were delving in further and learning about the impacts for individuals who had migrated to the region, leaving everything behind in search of a better life and better opportunity. This is what Casa Guanajuato, our partners in Kennett Square, had framed for us in the conversation that they wanted to have. And the space for playback is such that we are individually bearing witness to one another's lived experience, and that's something that is so crucial right now, as there is so much division across the country and so much space of reckoning that's needed. This forum has allowed us to invite in community member stories, to amplify them, to bring them to life, and to have that space of listening. So the first piece of planning that we had done was, okay, when we can gather in person, how can we make this safe and make this work? And so that was this remote, this mobile performance experience that we planned for in the fall, and that now is activated in the spring. We also had a couple of productions that had been filmed. The two that were on stage, or set to be on stage at the time, one was Hold These Truths and Shakespeare in Love. We ended up having those available virtually. So we just put those out online and allowed folks the experience of seeing them. Of course, it was very different because it hadn't been filmed intentionally to be shared. They were the one was an archived filming, and we just kind of had the cameras at one angle, and that's all that you see. But it was wonderful to give the audiences something to hold on to. And at that point in time, it felt pretty novel to have some virtual content that we could share. The next step for People's Light, we did offer some events on our campus, including car concerts. We had musical acts, and folks could drive into our sizable parking lot. People's Light has a 7-acre campus, and so we have people drove into the parking lot. You had your parking space where you parked, and the space next to you where you could put out beach chairs and enjoy the musical performances in a socially distant and safe way. We did that last summer. We are offering it again this summer and have wonderful musical acts that will be joining us. We also did a Folk Tales in the Garden offering for young children, for families and young children, where we had 2 storytellers who are opening up folk tales, and certainly stories of various cultures represented in those experiences. And it's offered in our Glen space. It's on the grass between our 2 theater venues, and allows for kind of a normalizing of social distancing, where we have pod seating. So a family will sit together, or a group will sit together in one area, socially distant from another group that sits on what looks like kind of a large lily pad, so to speak, or picnic tables to keep folks socially distant. And the response to both of those in-person offerings, the car concerts and Folk Tales in the Garden, was really overwhelming, because folks just seemed so hungry to gather and to be able to be in a space together last summer when we offered it. We're offering both of those again this summer as well. And when we headed into the fall, we produced pieces that were designed to be shared virtually. So we filmed A Christmas Carol in concert that was something that was entirely designed to be virtual. So very different from the first iteration, where we just filmed at a static shot. This was a much more engaging kind of experience. And we also commissioned artists to make short form pieces that we could share virtually as well, and commissioned a piece called Spiritual Uprising that happened this fall. So the virtual content was very important to get out in the winter when we knew we couldn't gather in person. and will continue to be a thought in our minds as we go forward, because for some people, engaging virtually is preferable right now while they're figuring out their comfort level about being in person inside in the theater or being outdoors. Some people still are hoping for virtual content, so we want to be finding those spaces for those individuals as well. But it's been a very a hybrid of all of these different offerings.
Well, that was one of the results of this virus, this pandemic, that it forced the theater and film and music to find new ways of reaching the people. We saw early on the virtual concerts, with the musicians in their respective homes playing the instruments, which was amazing to see that on a screen with multiple faces. Um, and so that was one way to sort of adapt, find new ways. It That would not necessarily go away. I think that having found that medium uh, and adapted to it so quickly, actually for many companies, that it will be very difficult to just say we will go back to do what we used to do.
Yeah, that you, I mean, to be able to have adapted that quickly and to figure out new methods. Yet you can't just say, no, oh, we can't do that. It's like, no, no, you can. We saw you do it. We can do that. And
That's
how do
right.
we
Yeah.
increase our bandwidth so that we do have those offerings that can be in person and that can be virtual? Which things make sense in what spaces, but knowing that we have a lot more capability than initially thought.
Yeah, I had the chance to see Jen Childs and Scott Greer doing the bit on one of those virtual presentations. It's amazing how quickly theater people adapted to this new way of doing things.
Absolutely.
Um, the difficulty for that is how to monetize that, because you need funds, you know you need money to continue doing what you do best, which is producing more and more pieces and creating and paying the playwrights and the actors and all that. And speaking of that, so many actors and actresses ended up doing odd jobs to survive in this economy. You know, that was, uh, I know Scott Greer had to do something that he was not necessarily happy doing, but it was a way to pay the bills.
Mhm.
And I suppose you know a number of people who had to do odd jobs just to survive during this period.
Absolutely. And some folks that it's not clear if they will be coming back to the field or not. Some people who have stepped outside of the space um, of art making, and who knows how long that may last. It's very unfortunate that it absolutely was a space of deep uncertainty and organizations trying to hold together as best they could. I'm very fortunate that People's Light was a recipient of PPP funding, of government funding. Many organizations received some of that funding in town as well, and that did allow the organization to keep a number of staff members on for a significant period of time, and while we were producing these experiments. But we also did pivot in a number of ways where we had hired like our costume shop workers to make masks. So it was a way that since we had the PPP funds, even though we weren't producing in person, the staff, we as a company hired these individuals to for a different purpose, a purpose that was needed in that moment.
Sure.
So that was really it was just wonderful to be in that kind of a space, to be able to say, okay, well, with government funds coming in, we are able to employ these individuals in ways that have meaning right now, and that mattered a lot. But yeah, going forward, it's hugely challenging, and we don't know what the damage may be to our field, because not only, I mean, this means artists may be exiting the field and needing to take on other responsibilities and jobs to make a living, and it also means organizations that may not be able to reopen safely, or to reopen and to be able to support their work. So there is significant need in the arts community right now. I mean, there's significant need within the social services industries as well. There's significant need in many, many, many spheres. And my hope is certainly in the space of philanthropy, is that individuals who, because we know there are plenty of individuals who did benefit financially in this period of time, that not everyone was impacted in the same way. And for folks who are able to support the arts, that they would consider doing that right now, because it is very significant to how the field will rebound. It's incredibly important to if how vibrant our arts landscape will be in the Philly region in the immediate future. So
Well,
relying on
Marcy, we're going to take a brief pause, and on the other side of this pause, we'll explore what the possibilities are for the future. It looks pretty positive right now. So, estamos aquí en USALA Radio, les habla Fernando Méndez. Marcy BRAMUCCI es nuestra invitada en el día de hoy. Dani Ramos y Schmidt Chatelier controlando la máquina digital. Regresamos en un momento. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news. Señores oyentes de USALA Radio, estamos aquí de nuevo con su programa La Mesa Redonda de Roundtable. Les habla Fernando Méndez. Marcy BRAMUCCI es nuestra invitada especial. Schmidt Chatelier y Dan Ramos controlando la máquina digital. Y bueno, this is a period of transition for everybody. For just our daily lives have been altered so much, and the theater, especially because everything came to a screaming halt. I mean, all of a sudden the lights of Broadway were out, and here in Philly the same thing with the theater, and your company felt that impact immediately. So, but now we're moving forward, and it doesn't look so bleak anymore. I think that having found new ways of expressing, of getting to the people, I think that now you combine all these other things, as you say, you'll go into the community directly, presenting plays in the neighborhoods. So, what is the future? What does it look like, Marcy?
Well, I think there's tremendous possibility going forward. As we were speaking before about the funding, is going to be crucial. How we make sure that we are finding ways to support this work going forward will be very, very important. But with that in mind, it is an amazing opportunity right now to be building organizations back and to be approaching work differently, that we can think through these spaces of access and inclusion. And we can think about, so who are the folks who may have been excluded from our work previously, who really benefited from the virtual space, or who benefited in different ways from any number of experiments that companies may have pursued. And I think the idea of returning, we can't say returning to normal, right? Because there isn't a normal. And what we had been living through as a society pre-COVID, we certainly know it was broken, societally. The work, the ways that we were leaving individuals out, and thinking about Black Lives Matter and George Floyd's murder and different aspects of our community that we know we weren't and haven't been doing all of the work that we need to really be intentional in whose voices we're elevating and how we are conducting our business, who are the artists that we're engaging, and who are the voices that we're uplifting. And those are all very, very critical considerations, even to your point from the very first segment about, the domination of white male often voices culturally, and this space of saying, no, that's not how we can or will or should operate going forward, that this is a reset button. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to press reset, say pause. Hopefully organizations have been delving deeply in their own privilege and in the spaces that they have to leverage the platforms that we have that can be leveraged for other perspectives, and we are hopefully making space and coming back intentionally to invite others into the fold, and building our organizations back with an eye towards inclusion. I think a lot, I work significantly in the realm of arts access with regards to individuals with disabilities, and there are many, many breakthroughs in this past year and a half for individuals with disabilities being able to engage with the arts in ways that serve them and in ways that benefit them. Certainly, there is so much more open captioning or closed captioning for the virtual content. Many individuals had greater access to that. this space of being virtual and having content that people can pause when they want, they can walk away from, is really useful for individuals potentially with autism or with sensory sensitivities. And so knowing that these offerings that we have can serve a number of populations, it's important that we are thinking that through in the making of any of this work going forward. So I think people will be very eager, the folks who enjoy coming to theater and enjoy going out to the arts and being live and in person, are hungry for it. It feels, we've watched a lot of wonderful television. I'm sure there's been a lot of binge watching, a lot of virtual content with theaters and other organizations adapting and offering experiments in virtual content. But I think many people are hungry to be back gathering live. And so this is a wonderful opportunity to bring people together, because that's something we haven't been able to do for for some time. So this is a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, I think eventually we'll return to some sense, maybe a new normal, perhaps. I mean, 100 years ago we had a pandemic that eventually killed a lot of people, and yet we came back somehow. And there were 2 or 3 wars that killed more people, and we survived all that. And what we have to survive now is this the failed blogger from Mar-a-Lago let us move forward with this new precedent and see what happens to the arts. I think that what you said, the funding is essential, and the National Endowment for the Arts is very important to support theater and every endeavor in that branch of human activity. So I hope that we go back to some sense of that. And I read something about if all these billionaires and multinationals paid their taxes, there wouldn't be any need for philanthropy. But you know, so
Yeah, let's hope. Let's see where that can lead us. But I think certainly something everyone can do is, letting your representatives know that arts and culture matter. So, being able to speak to your representatives and letting them know that the support that came in during COVID was substantial and was necessary. And without it, many organizations would have shuttered. The other thing, to your point about, having survived all of these other tragedies and events that we've come out of, it's learning from taking the opportunity to learn from what we had been doing, the things that we no longer want to perpetuate, and how do we want to move forward intentionally. So, yeah.
yeah. Well, so I know you mentioned you have immediate plans to go to another company, and what is your expectation in this move? What do you expect to accomplish?
Well, what's exciting about this organization? This is Hedgerow Theater Company, and I'll be starting as the executive artistic director beginning in July full time. And it's wonderful. I mean, this is an organization that's existed for just about 100 years. Next year would be the 100th anniversary celebration in 2022 and 23, and it's a space for artistic exploration and invention. And the the community has carried this organization all of this time. It has such a rich history and legacy, and I'm excited to lean back into its original roots as being a space of artistic exploration, and to weave that in together in a present day context for making sure that there's greater representation on the stages within the staff, and drawing on the values that the organization has held dear for all this time. So it's a unique organization. We have a resident company of actors. Some live on the campus, and it is a campus. It's a lovely 100-seat rustic theater that had been a grist mill historically from the 1840s. And so this is a space that is very ready to be activated inside. But in the meantime, we have a summer Shakespeare production coming up. Two Gentlemen of Verona will be produced this June and July outside at Hedgerow.
So
And
what is the physical location of the two places? First, People's Light, and then the other, the Hedgerow.
so People's Light is located in Malvern, Pennsylvania, so in Chester County. And Hedgerow is in Rose Valley, which is right next to Media, Pennsylvania, in Delaware County, in the suburbs southeast of Philadelphia.
Well, Marcy, we wish you the best, much success in your future endeavors, and I hope
Thank
you come back to visit us. This has been lovely and entertaining. Um, very
Such a pleasure. Thank you. I
informative.
absolutely would love to come back. This is so lovely to chat with you. Thank you for the space that you are making to elevate these considerations around the arts.
No, really, thank you very much. You make us better. You make us seem smart because we invited you. So, um, bueno, muchas gracias, señores oyentes de USA la Radio. Les agradecemos mucho su sintonía. En el día de hoy se despide Fernando Méndez, nuestra invitada especial, Marcy BRAMUCCI, y Schmidt Chatelier, controlando la máquina digital con Dani Ramos. Los esperamos hasta la próxima. Greetings from the city of brotherly love. I am Fernando Mendez, host of the Roundtable. We invite you to listen to our discussion of the themes of the day when we bring you regional, national, and international news.